All right. Oh God. Okay. I'm getting a weird. It says we've been live for 24 hours, 34 minutes, and 57 seconds. Um,
No wonder I'm so tired.
yeah, that's a long time. Um, okay, I'm just gonna assume it's okay. Muse, can you just check over and let me know if it's working accurately? Um,
It says happening now.
okay. It's always something weird that has to happen.
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing us here.
Okay, great. Hopefully we haven't actually been live for 24 hours because someone would have watched me get dressed this morning and feels a little private.
That is, talk about ethics.
So we today, the three of us, are going to be talking about the purpose of power. Muse, I'm concerned looking at your face right now.
Just because I can't tell what's exactly live here
Happening?
and what's not. Yeah. So.
Okay. Maybe I'll check that on my phone here. Before we dive in, yeah, we're live. It's working. Before we dive in, sorry for the slow start here. We have a course starting a week from Thursday. It's primarily for practitioners, for somatic sex educators, for touch practitioners, but it's really applicable for most anyone who is working one-on-one with clients or with groups, from coaches to clergy and spiritual advisors to parents, we could even say, to teachers, school teachers. I mean, it's not a good time for school teachers to be able to join us, but it's called The Source of Embodied Ethics. And we'll drop the link to it in the comments here. But you can find that. I'll drop the link in there in a little bit on our website, instituteforeroticintelligence.com. And power is a big topic that we're going to be talking about throughout that course because it is such a essential part of being an ethical practitioner. I mean, really just an ethical human, because power is at play in every interaction that we have always. And starting to understand that and look at it and use it skillfully can be really impactful. And we talked a little bit about power 2 weeks ago in a different conversation that we had. And so you can also go back to that one and hear more about what we have to say about power. I'm sure there will be some overlap because these conversations are not scripted. So we'll probably revisit some things that were a part of that conversation as well. But first, before we dive into the purpose of power, I think it would be really helpful for us to define power, because it can be such a loaded word and we have so many feelings about it, but what actually is it? And I can give a definition, but I wonder if either of you want me to just give a short, sweet definition?
Start us off there, and then we can see if there's something we want to add to it.
So this is not my definition. This is very much Cedar Barstow's definition from her book, Right Use of Power. But power is simply the ability to have an influence or an impact on a person, a situation, a group, yourself, the world, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, one of the modern definition, or modern, I don't know what that word is. One of the current social media saturated words that we use these days is influencer, which definitely makes my skin crawl. But influencer, that's a modern or updated version of that power definition, which Cedar got from other folks. So. But that's a definition of, interestingly enough, magic. One of the definitions of magic as well. Magical craft is to have an impact, to have an intentional impact.
Beautiful. And So knowing that now, the definition of it, it's a neutral thing. I guess it feels important to say it's not.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not intertwined with values and judgments. Power itself is a neutral thing. But we get ourselves into trouble with it. Most of us have experienced, I mean, if you're paying attention in your life at all, I think it's safe to say we've all experienced some misuse and abuse of power in all kinds of ways and situations. And I guess I want to start with, how do practitioners, we spoke about this a little bit last week, but what are some ways that practitioners get themselves into trouble with power? Just one or two ways.
I think one of the ways that I see quite frequently in both psychotherapy supervision with psychotherapists and supervision with somatic sex educators is the discomfort with the inability to see power as neutral, and the discomfort with the inherent relationship between client and practitioner as up power and as down power and up power respectively. And a real understandable and critical desire to empower clients by abdicating, by refusing to really acknowledge in their own embodiment the up power that is inherent and necessary, a healthy, necessary part of the relationship. So that's a good broad thing that is really the place I get into the weeds in my own life. That's the place I have to look at most carefully, as you both know, since we're in our own, at the Institute, we're in our own power dynamics. I mean, of course we are, but we're in a very specific power dynamic because I'm the founder and you two are up, coming into your power as practitioners. And so.
Yeah. And so I just want to give some quick definitions, because I think we'll probably keep using this language a little bit, but you said, Christiane, up power and down power.
Yeah,
and just to make that super clear, that we're primarily talking about role power in this conversation, which is the power that two people have or the power differential that exists, not because of who you are or where you come from or your gender or skin color or your own personal sense of power and capacity in the world, but from the positions that we're in with one another. So in a therapist-client relationship, the therapist is in a role and the client is in a role, and the therapist has more power in that relationship than the client. And so the therapist is up power, the client is down power. And it's not a bad thing to be down power in this kind of a situation. It's actually potentially can be really helpful. It's a neutral thing to be down power, maybe even a necessary thing, which is what you're saying.
Yeah. And so I think it's helpful to say down power does not mean disempowered. It's very important, because I think that's where, in my example of how we get into the weeds, that tends to be the conflation that's really erroneous. It's not, down power doesn't mean disempowered. And I think that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today, the purpose of power and how we navigate the really subtle and nuanced terrain of empowering an other, in this case a client, but also it could be a child, it could be a student, it could be all, it could be a parishioner, it could be so many different folks who are just by virtue of their role, as you're saying, Alyssa, are in a down power position. How do we empower without disempowering, and how do we approach them in their organic place of power without assuming or coming from an assumption that they are disempowered? Because that's a very different, how we approach our clients if we feel they're disempowered is very different than how we approach them when we feel like they're quite empowered and they're also in a very vulnerable position with us, relationship with us, as we are in an up power position. So yeah.
To me, there's something freeing and even inherently empowering when we know our place, when we know our roles, and when we can really clearly define that, yes, I'm in a position here. The seat that I'm in is this seat of power, of up power. We could say that or not, but in here, how do we empower you, continue to invite, request, even require at times that our clients step forward into their power from this place that is building upon their sovereignty, from this place that is trusting that it's there. Maybe they don't even trust it in themselves. And that's in part of taking our seat and our power, is to sort of notice what's going on and notice how we can bring people up and into a greater sense of their own empowerment, even through a dynamic where they were approaching from a not up power position.
Mhm.
Yeah. It feels like we're already answering the question about what is the purpose of power.
I think we have, but yeah, I mean, well, one of them, some of them.
At least in the context that we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Which the purpose for wield, and there's so much more we can say about this, but for wielding our power as practitioners is to empower our clients, to help them come into their own power and to recognize that it's available to them, and to move towards their own healing, holing, belonging, all kinds of words like that. It's pretty
Yeah.
simple, actually.
Well, yes, yeah,
And not
yep,
easy.
totally, right, exactly. It's not simple, or it's simple, and it's not, and it's also paradoxically complex, because I think what we're talking about, of course, what we're talking about, we like to use the word ecology and ecological, and what we're talking about is an ecological process. It's a relational, deeply intimate, organic, ever unfolding, constantly evolving relationship that either can go over into the weeds, and sometimes, and often does to one extent or another, because it's a relationship. Like you were saying earlier, Muse, I'm going to misattune to you because I will, in part that's even some of my job, is to create the environment within which we can test our resilience wings and really test our attachment. But and then other times we're going to be over here in this, completely numinous, amazing place that sometimes in our work looks like ecstasy. It's phenomenal. I want to come back to the definition that we're using here for power, and to come back really specifically to the purpose of power and the purpose of right use of power. Those feel different to me, the purpose of power versus the purpose of right use of power. And power is inherent in every relationship. You already said that, Alyssa. And there is a way in which we can use it there's a way in which we must use it in weaving with our client's power, in order to have the influence the client is wanting. So the client comes to us for a reason, has a particular point of pain or curiosity or something that's not working, and help me with this, and we're agreeing to use our joined power to affect some sort of change. In this case, it's a healing of sorts, and so it's not even that we're over here and our job is to help empower them so they can do their thing over there. It's no, all right, I'm going to, you get to have my power. I'm a surrogate power bank for a little while, and you get to have it, and we're going to work in union to help affect this change, to have this influence that you are longing to experience.
So beautiful. Let's give some examples of what that could actually look like, how that actually happens on the ground with clients.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I'm thinking of, and Christiane, I think, to just punctuate what you were saying there, is when you say you can have my power, I'll be a surrogate for this power dynamic or dance. It feels important to also say, from within the place of our seat, that we're
Yes,
in
right.
this seat.
Yes.
And through this, we are in a series of experiments, say, a series of trial and error. And so, for me, one of the things is to really not just give lip service to this idea of we are co-creating our time together, but to really invite them to step forward and step in by doing things like giving a couple of choices, maybe giving 2 or 3 menu choices, and then having them really consider and pause and then bring themselves forward with an idea or a concept or a way that they could even add on to an idea. So giving choice, and then sometimes it is in that sort of, call it multiple choice sort of arena. And then other times it's more open-ended. I could be giving a breath practice, for instance, and then just say, so tell me about this, bring me into your experience here, and tell me about a way that this might work better for you. Is there a different position that we could try? Or is there a different cadence or whatever it is? And then really sometimes it's drawing it out in that way. And then that, to me, starts to seed the field for it to start to more organically come forward requests. I've had a client come forward and say things like, gosh, when you sigh really loudly, to me, that has me feeling like I'm not breathing well enough, because like I'm feeling like you're trying to tell me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, great, good. Let's pause here. Let's talk about this. So here's some of what's happening for me when I'm sighing over here. And it's like to celebrate those moments when they actually do come forward and give some feedback around this isn't working. So those are 3 different ways that I do in my practice daily with client to client work with, helping to bring a greater sense of empowered sovereignty, at least into this room. And then the teaching around that, or the example around that, is that, okay, so then how does this apply once you leave, our lab here? How do you continue to bring yourself forward, or continue to listen, or when you're, because we're all sometimes in up power and sometimes in down power, and we have different responsibilities from within those roles.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I keep thinking of, I used to study with a Zen teacher, and traditional Zen is very hierarchical, and there's very clear roles that have power, and roles that are up, very clear roles that are up power, and very clear roles that are down power. And I started studying with her almost a decade ago, before I was looking into any of this at all, but she'd studied power quite a bit. And she said something really beautiful to me that has stuck with me since then. And I'll see if I can bring it around to how I work with clients one-on-one. But she said, in her role, don't trust her as the teacher, trust the teachings that come through. So there was a bit of a distinction, like the lineage in Zen is what's trustable. She's still very human and is going to mess stuff up and, harm people and do all kinds of things. But the lineage is distinct from that. And so there was this really nuanced, like, yes, she has power, but really what has power is the lineage. And it just set up, there was a really clear, like, question me. I am to be questioned around everything. And it was very true about her. And it just set up this really beautiful precedent in my system for working with myself in relationship to people who are up power, depending on our role, and how I want to be with people when I am up power. Yeah. And it feels like modeling that, holding the seat, but also so much humility in the midst of it, without collapse. Because so often what you're speaking to, Christiane, is that practitioners, teachers, guides, whatever, there's a posturing that can happen and a collapse that can happen. And in between, there's this really beautiful humility that's not collapse, but that's a real recognition of, like, yes, I have a role here and I have power and influence, and and I'm human, and I'm going to be checking in with you and wielding it in a way that is, I keep using the word humble because I can't think of anything else to say, but very close to the earth
Uh-huh.
is what I want to say about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the confusion, because we have zero, really zero role models. If we look really to the leaders, the, in quotes, are leaders, capital L, we really have zero role models for this beautiful paradox of I am humble and close to the earth and question everything, run it through the filters of you and all of your experience and what feels true to you. And it's going to be different for everyone in the room, what feels true and what gets filtered out and what gets questioned and what gets, gilded and what gets put on a pedestal. Um, and also like the humble, close to the earth, I'm just human, and I know something here. If I've done my, if I'm not, what is the word, charlatan? If I'm not a charlatan, or that's probably not the right word. I've actually gone to school for this. I've devoted my life to this. I give a shit about this. And so I know something about this. I know something about this. So I'm humble, and I also might have expertise. And so that in our line of work, because we're not just a channel for transmission, we're actually, we could say all sorts of things about whether or not doctrine, the doctrine of psychotherapy and somatic sex education should be just questioned left and right. But there's a body of wisdom there that's applicable. It's a practical body of wisdom, and research has gone into it. And I'm teaching it, and I'm holding it, and I'm in a position of role power because I've studied it extensively. And you're coming to me because you have a dilemma or a point of pain that happens to fit in with the area of expertise I've devoted my life to. So I probably have some ideas and question everything. And where do we get that role modeling for that both and of, okay, something, and what was that you just did? Why did you say that? Why did you do that? Mhm. Yeah, you're gonna. Mhm.
Well, yeah, I love that you ended there, because that's what I was thinking is, and this is so different from the how we have learned power growing up. We would defer to our parents or to our teachers or to our clergy, or I could even remember, I was thinking about in 2004, I did a yoga teacher training, and there was this module where they were telling us how to be with people, and it was, don't ever say anything about your diet if it's not perfect. Don't ever talk about what you do in your social world. Don't be friends with your students. And it was like, in this particular modality, at this particular place that I went to for this 4-month yoga teacher training, we're all coming out as these saints who don't actually have lives, and we're not allowed to, it struck me back then, like, what? And I was in my 20s, late 20s. And I even back then I thought, this doesn't feel right. We're here in this modality, that's about union. And yet here we are separating ourselves and creating this hierarchy of spiritual purity.
Mhm.
And so it's not just in top-down corporations or in educational institutions. It's all over. And I think since 2004, I think we've actually come a long way, and probably even that place that I went, it doesn't teach things like that anymore. I think there's a real call and drive to being authentic and to taking our seats, but acknowledging we're on the path too. We're walking this path alongside, and we're a few steps or maybe many steps further, so that we've learned a thing that we can bring back, but that it doesn't make us more of anything, and that's, I think, where we can get knotted up or tied up in this idea of power, and become and have it bring value judgment into it. This is good, or power is bad, or if I give it all away, or if I don't have any needs, then actually that's going to create peace in my life or something. Whereas what winds up happening is that nobody's in power, or we're just volleying around and fumbling in the dark.
There are two things about what you just shared, Muse, that really strike me. And one of them is the question that I find fascinating, which is how to have authority without control. And that leads into the thing that I think so many of us are still taught these days, even though there's this great pendulation swing, especially in parenting, but that don't question authority. Don't question authority. And that's so, I think it absolutely extends to, it's rampant in the medical and healthcare fields. Don't question authority. Don't question your doctor. And that is such a pervasive model that our clients come into their work with us holding and embodying. Don't question authority. Don't listen to yourself. Don't, and that don't, and then if you're the authority, don't be human, because how can you be human and wield your authority by means of control if you're acknowledging that you're actually human, and that you go home and, eat a Twix bar or whatever, watch Netflix or porn or whatever it is that you do that would just, you're like, don't admit that, whatever you do. So yeah, so those particular areas are very interesting to me because they're so culturally relevant. We're taught so early on, do not question. I'm your parent because I said so.
Because I said so.
Because I said so.
Yeah. Well, and it's always so interesting when then clients come in who have been in that kind of a model their whole lives and aren't really aware of it. And they come in and they're just like, tell me what to do.
Yeah,
And
you
they're
tell me.
so disempowered and so dissociated even from their power at all, because it's never forever. The role power has meant that they just do whatever the practitioner says.
Yeah, disassociated. And there's even for some folks, and I imagine certainly there's a spectrum here, but it's probably safe to assume that for some folks, this is actually a trauma response. That me believing, and me as a little one or a client or a patient finding my spine and my in-breath and saying, no, that doesn't sound right, says who, actually put me in potentially grave danger. Either from shaming or actual, physical violation. So it's a really important place of assessment for us when we're sitting with somebody to consistently attune to how is this body and this system, this soma in front of me, designed and shaped around this understanding that they are powerful, they have power, and we're in a power dance here. And is that even something that this soma can acknowledge? It's safe enough to acknowledge.
Awesome. So we have just a few minutes till we need to wrap up here. I think the thread that has my attention is the way we're talking about power. There's a real joining with and partnership with our clients, or with whomever, that has us coming from a really different place when we're wielding our power with clients, which is all the time. When we're in conversation with them. And so that word, the word partnership, feels really strong for me in this moment of that's how we're orienting. We use the word co-created quite a bit, but we're coming together to be utilizing it and working with all the power that's in the room, personal power, role power, all of it, so that our clients can find their way to what it is that they're wanting.
To me, there's something about staying. When you talk about partnership, it's like we're staying in. So I've definitely had the experience where I'll menu a couple of things to give them a choice, and then they say, well, I don't know, what do you think? You're the expert here. I'm here to see you tell me. And that could be an instance where I straighten up and say, okay, yes, right. I'm the one, I'm the guide. Let's go this way. Let's go forth. And sometimes that's actually completely the right choice. But other times that's basically an avoidance. It's sort of like we could stay there and say, yeah, I am, and I want to hear from you. Like if you were to, if this were to be your choice, and it is, or maybe I can give you a little bit more detail about what I mean here so that you can continue, or you can make this choice with me. So there's choice points all along the way to continue that partnership in power, or to just go, fine, I'll just take the reins and we'll do this. And there are really different experiences and really different opportunities that then our clients get to have. And so that's digging into a little bit of potential discomfort, where now we don't, neither of us really know. And so we'll just sit here in awkward silence until we get there, and letting ourselves do that. That
And
is so empowering.
Studying what it's like when you're there, getting
Right.
curious about what happens. We don't know what we're going to do.
Right. We just stumbled right into the work. we thought it was over there, and oh my goodness, it's right
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So the source of embodied ethics, our upcoming 8 week.
8 weeks.
8 week. Okay.
It could be 10 years, but instead we'll just do 8 weeks.
Great. 8 week online course. Starts a week from Thursday. Yeah, power's a big part of it.
Power's a big part of it.
Power's a big part of it. And
Yep. Embodiment.
Embodiment of power, and looking at ways that we've experienced abuse of power and have abused and misused power ourselves. And we're really gonna, I think, be spending a lot of time feeling into this, looking into this.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So instituteforeroticintelligence.com is where you can find that. And if you have questions or want to let us know about how this impacted you, or want to be in contact with us about anything, email us info@instituteforeroticintelligence.com, and Muse will likely get back to you.
There you go.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. How do I?